Hi everyone. For today we're going to do some notes about complex patterns of heredity. As always, copy down the notes you need. This shouldn't take you too long, but let's get into it. Anything in red, fill down on your notes, pause the video as you need, the standard. So, there are some traits that don't follow the normal dominant recessive pattern. Today we're going to talk about a few examples of those. One example being sex-linked genes. Sex-linked genes are linked to the sex chromosomes, so they're usually found or the X chromosome or the Y chromosome. Normally, it's the X chromosome because the X chromosome has most of your genetic information of the two sex chromosomes, partly because the Y chromosome is smaller. So example, hemophilia, which is a blood clotting disorder, or color blindness. Recessive traits are more common in biological males than females because males only have one copy of the X. So if they get a sex-linked trait like color blindness on their X, color blindness is recessive. Y can't carry it. So if they have an X with a bad copy and no other X's, they will show the trait. Whereas biological females, if you have two X's, if you have one bad copy, the other one would still be able to see colors. So it's more common in males than females. Doesn't mean females can't be colorblind. There's also different types of inheritance where it's not just one gene. Your height is an example. It's not just one gene because you're not just either 5 foot or 6 foot. You could be somewhere on the spectrum of heights. We call this polygenic inheritance. Poly meaning many, genic meaning genes. So it's controlled by many genes. So several genes often influence a characteristic. Maybe scattered on the same chromosome, maybe scattered on different chromosomes, doesn't matter. Examples, eye color, height, weight, hair, and skin color. And your weight does have biological components to it. Another form is incomplete dominance. Incomplete dominance is just what it sounds like. It's where one allele is not completely dominant over another allele. Meaning, if you have a red flower and a white flower, and they have one gene of each, instead of being red or white, whatever the dominant trait is, it's pink. So it's both red and white, but they express as pink. So incomplete dominance is dominance that's not completely one or the other. Snapdragons are this little flower thing here. For some reason, they're a very common example. They always talk about snapdragons. One, because you can breed snapdragons, and I think two, because the name is pretty cool. Another example is having multiple alleles, so a gene with 3 or more different alleles. An allele, remember, is a form of a gene. Example is human blood types. You have A, B, AB, or O, and we will do a whole lab on that. We normally write it as IA for A, IB for B, and little I for O. The reason we have the I's is just to show that O is recessive. So we need a capital and lowercase to show that there's a dominant gene and a recessive gene, but there are two different ones, so we put I as our letter. It's weird. Another format, codominance. So for codominance, two alleles are expressed at the exact same time. With the blood type example, that would be AB blood type. You're not a new form. It's not that A and B make C. You could be A, you could be B, you can be both A and B. Neither is dominant over the other. They both co-dominant, they both express. Now, some characteristics can be influenced by their environment. So for example, hydrangeas, which are flowers, the color depends on the pH of the soil. So you can actually take a hydrangea that's supposed to be red, and if you make the pH really acidic, you can turn them blue. Fur color of an Arctic fox depends on temperature. If it's really warm out and there's not a lot of snow, if you're an Arctic fox, like a white fox, white-furred fox, on a non-snow background, you're a dead fox. So in the summer, they turn brown, and then when it gets cold, their fur turns white. That's why if you see at zoos, most of the time, if they have an Arctic fox, it's in an indoor exhibit because then they climate control the foxes to make their fur always white. So they kind of trick you there because no one wants to go see a fox and it's brown and you go, but that's an Arctic fox. It's supposed to be like snowy white. So they put them inside and control the temperature. Human height is influenced by nutrition. If you do not eat enough, that can affect how tall you get. That can affect a lot of things about your health, especially in the early years. And human skin color can be influenced by the sun. Now, genetic disorders. We have talked about this in different ways. When we talk about genes and genetic disorders, we mean that genes are damaged or copied incorrectly. This results in the production of faulty means like inefficient, not fake, but inefficient or damaged proteins. We call these mutations. They are heritable, meaning it can be passed parent to child. They're not very common for the scary ones, and they're often carried on recessive alleles. So some examples of these. We have sickle cell anemia. Sickle cell anemia is a body produces a defective form of the protein called hemoglobin, which I don't know about you, but that's like one of my favorite words. Hemoglobin is such a fun word. I don't know why, but it is. So is cattywampus. So they're found within red blood cells. They usually bind oxygen and transport it through the body, but when the hemoglobin is mutated, it's twisted in the sickle or like a crescent moon shape, and it can't carry as much oxygen. One benefit of sickle cell anemia is you can't get malaria as easy, which is a mosquito-borne illness. Cystic fibrosis. So cystic fibrosis is where your body produces a defective chloride-moving protein. Your lungs get thick with mucus. Imagine having snot-filled lungs. As you try to breathe, if your lungs are filled with like this fluid, this mucousy fluid, it's going to make taking a deep breath really hard. It's going to make things painful. It's going to clog up everything. It's going to prevent your lungs from filling with air appropriately. Hemophilia, blood does not clot correctly. This is definitely a sex-linked trait carried on the X chromosome. So it's a clotting disorder, meaning like if you get a cut, you could bleed a lot from something like a tiny paper cut. Huntington's disease. This one's really unfortunate. It's a gradual deterioration or breaking down of brain tissue in middle age. When you get Huntington's, you're normally about only 40. It starts with mild forgetfulness or irritability. Then you notice muscle control issues, fine motor skill issues. You will have tremors. Then it eventually deteriorates into severe mental illness, eventually death. Problem is it's genetic, and you're like, well, how do we have this going in our population? Because you don't know you have it till you're 40, so you probably already had a kid and passed those genes along. A parent with Huntington's doesn't always have a child with Huntington's, but they'll carry the disorder. Now, with treating genetic disorders, it's treatment, not cure. Most of these cannot be cured. You can undergo counseling with a genetic counselor and look at problems that could be passed parent to child. Some diseases like phenylketonuria can be PKU can be determined early and treated. Other than can be managed, but for the most part, there's no cure for these things. It's something you have to live with. Some of them cause death, not all of them cause death. It just depends on the disorder. So have these notes copied, and when you're done, submit your Google Doc. And thank you. Yeah, feel free to go back in the video if you need anything. Other than that, have a good day, guys.